This series is getting more popular, so you know I had to give the people what they want with this. So prepare yourselves for some of the most diabolical crash outs on regular show. Hope you enjoy like always, and let me know which ones you think were justified and which ones you think were not. The first episode we're gonna check out is Season 2 Episode 1's Hello Governor, which sees Mordecai and Rigby watching an old cheap movie about a British taxi possessed by the soul of his driver, seeking vengeance on the gang members responsible for his death. At the end of the movie, Mordecai is asleep, but Rigby has basically been traumatized. He can't sleep and starts seeing and dreaming about cars and British-related stuff coming to get him. Mordecai tries to help him overcome this new fear, and soon enough, Pops even offers Rigby a ride in his taxi to show him that there's nothing wrong with taxis. On the ride, they end up deep in the woods where the British taxi from the movie actually ends up scaring them, leading to Mordecai's realization that it is in fact real. The car later knocks out Mordecai and Pops, and this is where Rigby lets out a crash out to save both of his friends. He breaks the headlights of the car and also buzzed up the vehicle pretty badly. Things go as far as him actually using a tree to destroy the whole taxi. And if this seems very strange, it is revealed that all of this was basically a dream because Rigby knocked himself out and imagined the entire thing. However, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to consider that this crash out was actually real and it happened in real time. Therefore, in analyzing everything that Rigby did from the time that he was knocked out, and in determining whether it was justified, I actually feel like it was. Because at the time that it happened, Rigby was under the impression that his life was in danger and that Pops and Mordecai had been knocked out by a killer car. Thus, in a moment of protecting them and keeping himself safe, he attacked the taxi in self-defense. This to me deserves a pass because it was actually noble and made to make sure that his friends were safe. So to me, 100% justified. But what do you think? The next episode for this video also comes from Season 2, and it is the Time episode. It starts with Mordecai and Rigby being excited about a zombie dinner party movie that is set to be released. However, unbeknownst to Rigby, Mordecai plans to take Margaret out to a chick flick, but he struggles to ask her out. Rigby takes this opportunity and ends up making her laugh, which makes Mordecai very jealous. And I won't lie, Rigby was definitely breaking the bro code on that one. Rigby continues to make Margaret laugh, which continues to piss Mordecai off. And then Rigby does the unthinkable. He asks Margaret out to see if she wants to watch the movie with him, and she also accepts. Rigby continues to rub all of this in Mordecai's face, which slowly makes Mordecai very angry. And as the time is getting ready for Rigby's date with Margaret, Mordecai microwaves all the clocks in the house so that Rigby won't be able to tell what time the day is gonna come on. The consequence of this is that Mordecai and Rigby end up in an alternate dimension where Mordecai starts crashing out against Rigby because of his jealousy, and he proceeds to push Rigby off a microwave they were hanging on, which leads to Rigby being erased from existence. However, Mordecai is able to have a conversation with Father Time, and Father Time allows him to reverse time so that he can get Rigby back at the end of the episode, and all of them can go happily ever after. And I think we can all agree that this crash out was not justified. I mean, inasmuch as Rigby was being a jerk with his advances towards Margaret, especially when he knew that Mordecai liked her, I don't think pushing him off a microwave into the infinite vacuum of space is warranted. The anger that Mordecai displayed to Rigby was definitely justified in a way, but then for him to go out to do this, in my opinion, makes this crash out unjustified. The next episode that we're gonna see is Camping Can Be Cool, and in this episode, Mordecai and Rigby find out that Margaret has never gone camping before and invite her and Eileen to their secret camping spot. They make a detour into a restricted access area at the campground, which they claim is their secret spot. And I just realized that as I was watching the episode for this video, that Rigby was pissed at Mordecai the whole time just because he brought Margaret and Eileen, and it was very funny for me to realize. But the trip seemed to be going well until it actually starts raining, but Mordecai accidentally locked everybody out of the car, trying to woo Margaret. Things go from bad to worse, and the camp ranger catches them in this restricted area and tells them to do their best to hurry up and go, and that he would come and get them. But this is where the crash out starts, because in the middle of them building a shelter to protect them from the rain, a deer that Margaret ran to earlier in the episode appears. But this time, it speaks to her. That was the first red flag. The second one is that it came out to reveal that it's actually an animal with a deer head, a human torso, one human leg, and another deer leg. And it turns out that the deer is pissed that humans come into the forest, polluted, and listen to terrible music. And because of some abandonment issues he had as a kid, he says that he will hunt everybody and make use of their bodies and bones for food. Obviously, everyone is scared, so they break into the car and start driving away while this deer man is chasing them. And he is very fast, I gotta give it to him. But they smash a lantern into his face, but he still doesn't give up and chases them. But fortunately, they stand in the middle of the road and an approaching car swerves off and hits the deer man, bringing his reign of terror to an end. And in judging how justified his crash out was, I really can't tell. Because, he was protecting his home, which was the forest. But then again, Mordecai and the others weren't really the ones damaging it, so it's like they were taking the punishment that was meant for other people. So in that space, I think he was out of bounds. He was justified in feeling mad, but not in the way he reacted. Kind of like Mordecai from the one we just looked at. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments again for this one because I'm stumped on it. But the next episode that we're going to be looking at is skunks. Because in that episode, Mordecai and Rigby had to pick up roadkill in order to complete some bingo game that Benson created. The last animal in the game is a dead skunk, which they see on the road. And because they think it's dead, they approached it trying to pick it up and celebrating. And unfortunately, it was actually alive the whole time and just taking a nap. So it sprays Rigby, which makes him smell really bad and even makes him start turning into a skunk as well. But the funny thing is, the skunk is actually happy that he sprayed Rigby. So much so that he doesn't even tell him how to get the sting off of himself. Skips then tells him that Rigby was sprayed by a were-skunk, whose stench is much worse than a regular one and initiates a transformation process that turns people into were-skunks as well if they don't get the smell off. Mordecai and Rigby try everything, from cleaning supplies to coffee from the coffee shop and even pineapple juice, but nothing works. Rigby starts crashing out against everybody, from Skips to Mordecai, and at his worst point, even Eileen. And these spray-induced crash-outs happen until Rigby finds up the original skunk and tries to beat him up so that he will tell him how to get the spray off. Rigby starts turning black and white as the transformation is almost done when he finds out that the cure is actually tomato paste, but he's prevented from using it by the actual skunk, who tries to beat him up so that he can stop him from curing himself. However, Rigby overcomes his adversary and splats the tomato paste all over himself and even some on the original skunk, turning both of them back into regular people and bringing their rampage and crash out to an end, and Mordecai and Rigby celebrate the bingo win that they eventually get. And to me, in judging this crash out, I would say that it's justified in the sense that it wasn't Rigby who was doing it. Rigby wasn't intentionally getting mad at people or yelling at them, but rather, he was suffering from the effects of the skunk spray. He was even apologetic and said sorry whenever he did lash out at either Mordecai, Eileen, and even Skips. So that tells me that it wasn't necessarily coming from a place of anger or hate, but then it was an uncontrollable urge that came onto him just because he was sprayed by the were-skunk. So to me, I would say that this crash out was justified for that very fact that it wasn't controlled by Rigby. In the past few months, we've seen a rise in people from all spheres of life crashing out. Some have had good reasons to do so, others not so much. One thing I noticed too was that most cartoon shows have scenes where characters go mad by crashing out, and I thought, why not take a look at some of them? So in this first video of this potential series, we'll be taking a look at the worst crash outs in regular show and judge whether the characters in question were tweaking, where they had a good reason to go College Division 2 crash out. And if this video does well, I would be glad to making this part of a series and even making a part 2 on this. Without further ado, let's get into it. And the first crash out moment I would like us to take a look at probably wouldn't come as a surprise to many of you who have watched regular show. And that is Benson going full Super Saiyan and sending Mordecai and Rigby to the emergency ward with his yelling in the episode Think Positive. The whole basis of this season 3 episode was that Benson basically had anger issues, and as he yelled at Mordecai and Rigby for their dumb stunts and wasting time, Pops didn't like it. So for the first time in the show, Pops took an authoritative step and told Benson that if he yelled at Mordecai and Rigby one more time, he would be fired. So now Benson is on thin ice, but all he has to do is not shout at Mordecai and Rigby, which in words seems simple enough. But not so much, because we all know how these two slackers could probably get a rock to yell at them in annoyance. However, things go from bad to worse for Benson, and in a bid to find the root of all his anger problems, we are sent back to his childhood, where we find out the origin of his yelling and the anger issues. So it turns out that he came from a very verbally abusive household that encouraged shouting at family members to get whatever he wanted. Benson learns firsthand from his father that the only way he could get what he wanted in life was to yell at people for them to do his bidding. Equipped with this revelation about his childhood, Benson goes on about trying very hard not to yell at Mordecai and Rigby, and he tries counting. And even though he was counting as a way to cool down himself, I definitely saw it as him counting the minutes till the crash out began, and this appears to be the final breaking point. When it begins, Benson's head starts to glow orange as gumballs in his head become fiery and start spinning around. A spear forms around Benson, and Skips is the first to realize that all of this is happening because Benson is bottling up his feelings because of the warning that Pops gave him. Skips informs Pops about this, and Pops immediately gives Benson the go-ahead to allow him to yell at Mordecai and Rigby. And this is when he releases all the pent-up annoyance, aggression, and rage that had been bubbling up against Mordecai and Rigby. He goes all in, describing how he's had to go through their insufferable behavior during his time as their boss. The end result of this is that Mordecai and Rigby are actually left speechless and in a huge crater that was created as a result of the screaming. And after this, Benson returns to normal. But guess what? Mordecai and Rigby are rendered basically tone deaf and cannot hear anything for the rest of the episode. And that was definitely a level 5 danger crash out. Mordecai and Rigby really had Benson gathering spirit energy from his anger to load the spirit bomb of yelling at them. And in seeing how this whole thing went about, I think this crash out was a deserved one. And I feel like you can't blame Benson. As much as you might have said he might have gone a little bit overboard, Mordecai and Rigby did have it coming. I mean, there's a certain level of laziness you can take from your employees meddling in your work before you lash out. So in my option and in my opinion, this crash out was definitely understandable. Before we go to the next crash out though, I made a video going in depth into Benson's anger and his early life. So if that's something you ever wanted to see, i.e. the reason why Benson is angry and how it's not deserved, you can click on it on the screen below or wait till the end of the video as it would be on the cards. The next person that we have on the list is a character most people don't really bring up, and that's Muscleman's one and only Starla. And her legendary crash out moment came in one of the first ever episodes we saw her in. And in the episode rightly named Muscle Woman, she gets introduced as Muscleman's ex-girlfriend who broke up with him just before the episode began. Due to this, Muscleman is sad and can't do his job well. And guess who has to pick up the slack caused by him not working well? Mordecai and Rigby. I think this is much deserved. And after doing much of this work, they can't stand it anymore and decided the only option is to get Muscleman and Starla back together. So Mordecai, Rigby, and Fives go to the mall where they find Starla, and Mordecai proceeds to give her a speech on why she should get back with Muscleman. Unfortunately, this whole plan backfires, and Starla ends up falling for Mordecai instead. Things go terribly wrong when Mordecai enters a relationship with her, and he's later forced to break up with her because he literally cannot do it anymore. And this, my friends, is where the crash out truly begins. Starla starts by throwing the table out of the coffee shop and exploding the whole thing, with her body mind you, and then proceeds to go berserk, chasing after Mordecai and Rigby while they drive away in the golf cart. She repeatedly body slams them as they enter into the park and does a foot slam so powerful that she causes an earthquake and causes trees to fly. This portion of Starla running after Mordecai and Rigby in the cart definitely reminds me of that time that they were also driving away from Muscleman when Rigby knocked Benson out, and because of that they didn't want Muscleman to see him. I don't know why, but the comparison over here is uncanny. But Starla continues this rampage into the park, and she continues to destroy stuff left, right, and center, not giving a care about who or what she's destroying. She becomes nature's greatest nightmare and starts to literally uproot trees, and even goes to the point of throwing a giant rock at a helicopter that was flying nearby, and sending the pilot to the resting place above in the sky. The situation is only brought to an end, however, when Muscleman approaches Starla and gives her a speech on how they're supposed to be together, love stuff, and all these things that nobody really cares for. But then this leads to her actually cooling off and ending the rampage in a pool of gross domestic love. And in rating this rampage, I would say that it was completely unnecessary. Like, Starla did not have a single song where she needed to be doing all of that. Mordecai didn't deserve this because he was only trying to get with her and break up with her so that she would get back together with Muscle Man, which every person in their right mind would probably do. So for her to go on this rage and destroy property and even life, it's way out of proportion and way out of question. And I feel like she should have definitely been arrested for this, at least a felony charge or a misdemeanor at least. Therefore, this crash out is way unnecessary. And in going into the final crash out of the episode, we're going to be taking a look at the most powerful enemy we saw in regular show. The one, the only, Anti-Pops. In this crash out, it entails him doing some damage on a scale that had not been seen on regular show up until this point. So during the space episodes in the last season of regular show, it is revealed that Pops is a secret alien child who fell to Earth and is basically the embodiment of everything good in the universe. However, as we all know, good cannot exist without evil. So the universe had to put all that evil energy into someone, and it crystallized into Anti-Pops. A villain so bad that he wouldn't mind giving a food place 0 stars. In the episode Kill Him With Kindness, Pops is coming to the end of his training and his battle with Anti-Pops draws near. In an attempt to end this whole thing before the battle even starts, Pops reaches out to Anti-Pops and is invited to join him at an arcade planet just to vibe. Even though this is most definitely a trap that everybody could see like 3 miles coming, Pops sees this as an opportunity to make amends with the most evil person in the universe and avoid a fight as a whole. He even goes as far as baking a cake for this momentous occasion. When Pops finally arrives at the arcade planet, Anti-Pops asks him to come into a room with broken consoles inside, and in breaking the ice, Pops offers him cake to make him feel better and make them become friends. This is where the legendary cosmic crash out starts from. Anti-Pops starts this rampage by slamming Pops' cakes down to the ground and reveals to him that he doesn't want peace, and that he is planning to destroy the universe. My man just wants violence over here. Pops tries to hug him and Anti-Pops throws him off, and this whole time, Pops is still trying to make peace with him. But Anti-Pops really came in with his 6-foot nonchalant dreadhead energy, and he is moments away from destroying Pops and wiping him out of existence. Anti-Pops starts steering and wiping the whole room apart, eventually making it completely white. And then he sets his eyes on Pops and traps him and eventually starts trying to erase him. He almost wipes Pops out of existence until the whole gang from the park pulls up and tries to help. However, Anti-Pops is a level 100 boss and he starts destroying the whole arcade, throwing consoles left and right. Earl, Pops' mentor and master, then comes in to make the ultimate sacrifice by jumping in battle against Anti-Pops to slow him down and buy the rest of the gang time. They eventually make their way to the spaceship, and the whole time Pops is in a state of confusion. However, the asteroid that was holding the arcade is being erased, and they enter the spaceship and manage to fly away at the nick of time before the asteroid is completely erased from existence. And I mean, wow. It's just wow. Anti-Pops was on pure hater energy throughout this crash out. He was constantly letting Pops know how much he hated him and that he just wanted to destroy him and everything because that's basically the goal of his whole existence. And you can't really argue with that, I mean. I'm pretty sure he was in the rights, and I would say that this crash out was very necessary. And now wait, hear me out before you click off the channel, off the video, and subscribe. I'm saying that it's warranted because up until now, Pops hadn't really come to grasp how much of a villain Anti-Pops was. In his mind, he thought that he could still use the old kindness and Naruto talk no jutsu to get him to change his ways, not realizing that this guy had hatred coursing through his veins. And the sacrifice of Earl brought the emotional turmoil that the finale needed, as Pops now had a reason to actually fight Anti-Pops and get him out of existence. But it's for these reasons that I think that this crash out by Anti-Pops was valid and entirely needed by the show. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this episode for Crash Out on regular show. I thought of this idea a few days ago and thought it would be fun to make it, so definitely let me know in the comments whether you're messing with it and would like to see a part 2 anytime soon, or a video on another show such as Adventure Time or literally anything else. Welcome back to the channel, guys. It seems we're on a regular show roll today, as we're gonna be continuing to look at more regular show crashouts. This is part 2 in the series that started a few videos ago, so I'll leave the first one in the description and at the end of the video so that y'all can go and take a look at it, because the response I got from that video was really good and it prompted this one. Some of the entries that were even made in the comments of the first videos made it into this one. So feel free to make more crash out recommendations in the comments, and without any more yapping, let's get on with the video. The first person we're going to be looking at in this video is Cloudy J, or CJ for short. And let me just say that she is the crash out queen. And there are so many times where she just goes full D1 crash out on the people around her. This temper of hers was evident from the very first time that she was introduced in the series in the episode Yes Dude Yes. In this episode, Mordecai plans to ask Margaret out on a date, but when he goes in to ask her, he sees another dude going down on his knees and Margaret saying yes dude yes. Thinking she's just got married to another dude, Mordecai becomes depressed and Rigby attempts to find a partner for him on the Couples Corral website, and it actually works. Mordecai goes on a few dates and eventually meets CJ, and they actually end up having a good time and things start looking positive for Mordecai. And soon after he invites her to the movies and she says yes, he runs into Margaret and her alleged boyfriend, but then runs away before she's able to introduce both of them. This makes him depressed again, and advice comes from the unlikeliest source where Benson tells Mordecai to let Margaret know about his feelings for her. On his way to do this, CJ spots him entering the coffee shop and decides to go and meet him. When Mordecai meets Margaret, she introduces the guy who Mordecai had seen her with as her cousin who just got his leg amputated and replaced with a wooden one. Now that this misunderstanding has been clear, Mordecai makes the terrible mistake of asking Margaret out to the movies. But just as he asks her, CJ enters the coffee shop and sees this, causing her to go full rage mode on them. And now CJ is understandably pissed and heartbroken because she doesn't understand. And now Mordecai is caught between a rock and a hard place. That is CJ and Margaret. And every word that comes out of his mouth just seems to make everything worse until CJ has had enough and becomes a literal cloud of lightning and winds, pushing everybody off their feet and destroying the coffee shop. Things are only relieved when Mordecai gives her a heart-to-heart message about not liking CJ in a romantic way yet. Mordecai ends up losing 2 birds with 1 stone, but hey, at least he got to go to the movie with Margaret's cousin at the end of the episode. I admit, CJ did make some presumptions and shouldn't have jumped to conclusions, but Mordecai asking her out first and then dishing those plans to Margaret as soon as he sees her is messed up on so many levels. So to me, CJ was definitely warranted in becoming a storm and low-key destroying the coffee shop. The next crash out that we're going to be looking at in this video is from the episode Fuzzy Dice, where the gang at the park try to figure out what to get Pops for his birthday. Pops comes in while they're still deliberating on this and tells him that he wants Fuzzy Dice from the Fun Fun Zone as his birthday present. So they get Rigby to dress up as a kid in order to get into the Fun Fun Zone and get a dice. They're told that in order for them to get the dice, they need to win 1 million tickets because they're not able to buy it with actual money. So everybody splits up to play different games in the zone, and after a convincing montage of Mordecai, Rigby, Skips, Fives, and even Muscle Man playing games, they're left with 20,000 more tickets to get the dice, but they only have 1 token. They narrow it down to play Skis Balls, since they consider it to be the only game where they can use the token to get enough tickets if they play well enough, and they actually end up doing it. And when it's time to present the dice to Pops, out of nowhere, the animatronics that were in the background playing music come alive and snatch the dice from them. And it turns out that these animatronics are actually a gang of bank robbers who did a bank heist a decade ago and hid some diamonds within the fuzzy dice. They were waiting for the perfect time to steal the dice and run away, and that perfect time happened to be the same night that the guys at the park wanted to get the fuzzy dice to surprise Pops. A few hijinks ensues, and everybody ends up at a port. And as the animatronics are trying to make their escape in a speedboat, this is where they busted out their firearms and started a war of bullets, ready to put everybody to sleep, even the FBI. Things unfortunately didn't pan out too well for them, as they also received a rainfall of bullets from the FBI. The FBI also ramped up their use of force, and finally they were able to overcome the Capicola gang, bringing an end to the reign of terror within the city for good, or until the episode's Take Me Amadeus, but that's a conversation for another day. And in terms of whether this rampage was needed or necessary at all, I honestly think it wasn't. And I also think that it didn't even escalate to as bad as it could, because the FBI really came in clutch for Mordecai, Rigby, and the others. I mean, there were so many ways that they could have easily disguised themselves to get the dice from the fun zone. They could have literally waited till nobody was in the shop or nobody was in the fun zone and then slowly made their place to the prize wall and taken the dice and run away. They did not need to go all out like this with the guns and in blazing fury. The next rampage that we're going to be looking at is courtesy of a one-time villain that appeared in Season 3's episode, Trash Bowl. But in that episode, Rigby is watching a show about a band, and the leader of the band says the secret behind his success was changing his name to The Urge. Naturally, Rigby wants to do the same thing, so he looks around the house for 2 random objects and ends up settling for a trash can and a painting of a boat. He then goes on to change his name to Trash Boats. And this was a terrible mistake because it didn't go over well with any of the others at the park, and they take the piss out of Rigby for his terrible choice of name change. This leads to Rigby regretting this and trying to change his name, but it doesn't work out right away since he doesn't have $50. So he ends up trying to deal with it, but man, it is not easy for him. And as Rigby tries to raise $50 for his name, every place he goes to get work rejects him because of how bad the name is. And when all hope seems lost and his face even appears in the newspapers, the unexpected happens when a cyborg appears in front of him while he's crying in the streets. It turns out that in the future, Rigby, or should I say Trash Bowl, is now super famous because of the name change. And The Urge, who was the leader from the band that was mentioned earlier, has fallen off and become irrelevant because nobody cares about him now. So he travels back in time to stop Trash Bowl from changing his name, and this is where he starts crashing the heck out. My man really pulled up with a double-barrel white laser guitar and starts firing at Rigby from the middle of town. He starts destroying objects while Rigby is running for his life, and eventually they reach the park and Mordecai becomes involved in it. The Urge isn't giving up, and he starts destroying the house, so Mordecai and Rigby have to hop into the golf cart and start driving away. And this is where this guy puts on a whole jetpack to catch up on them. The Urge later goes into infrared mode and destroys the forest in pursuit of Mordecai and Rigby. They're able to reach the courthouse a few minutes before it closes, and after barricading the door, Rigby gives the money to the clerk, and she slowly but surely effects the change, turning his name back into Rigby. This leads to a chain reaction where other famous people keep coming from the future to destroy other people who made similar name changes that caused them their coolness and their fame. Eventually, the whole courthouse goes up in flames and the episode comes to an end. But in looking at whether this crash out was deserved or necessary, I would have to give it a big no-no, because the Urge literally had no reason to come after Rigby to prevent his name being changed. There were literally 1,000 things that he could have done to maintain his relevancy when he started falling off. He could have used social media, he could have gone on Instagram, he could have dropped better music, he could have stayed in shape, and so on. But his choice to blame Rigby was just super lazy and whiny, and based on this, I feel like his crash out was very undeserved. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching up until the end, and like I was saying before, this video was made because of the overwhelmingly positive response I got in the first one. So please show the same love to this and suggest in the comments other moments I can use for a part 3 if that's what you want to see.